and I still haven't gotten to Sarah Palin blaming President Obama for her son's arrest. I really wanted to connect that to the article on. Oh, yeah, Stacey Dash blaming President Obama for the lack of the diversity in the Oscars. You know, there's this propensity in conservatives to do everything they possibly can to bend over backwards, to become contortionists in order to blame President Obama. And now with Sarah Palin, her son was arrested on Monday night at a rally tonight for Donald Trump. She basically made the case that veterans suffering from PTSD, their symptoms are magnified and amplified because of President Obama's lack of respect for the military. And I've already opened the can of worms, so I might as well keep going. You know, whatever. So there's two problems with this, right? Let me reiterate. Her son was arrested for being drunk while having a firearm and domestic violence, beating up his girlfriend. And he was arrested right before her endorsement of Donald Trump. Doesn't sway them at all. She continues to give the endorsement. Donald Trump embraces her insanity. And tonight she answers it. But instead of addressing personal responsibility, instead of addressing her son's need to get treatment, instead of addressing her son's need to be responsible for his decisions, to be responsible for the fact that he was carrying a weapon while he was intoxicated, to be responsible for the fact that this is not the first time that he's been arrested for violence. He got into a fight back in 2008 with alongside his sister Bristol, right? They bust someone's head open. Instead of talking about him being responsible for his own actions, she decides, what better way to get out of this than to blame Obama? Somebody mentioned on Twitter, like, don't they realize at this point that blame Obama is actually a parody, is actually, you know, sarcasm, and that everyone is hip to this game? I would say everyone that has working, functioning digits is hip to this game, right? Because if you've looked at the history of issues with veterans in the United States of America, there has been no greater opponent to funding research, to funding, better funding the VA, for funding jobs for veterans coming home. There's been no greater enemy to those issues than the Republican Party. And now, instead of taking this as an opportunity to speak up about it, she decides to let's minimize this conversation to being about President Obama not respecting the military. Well, I think that's convenient, right? Because the Republican Party has been opposed since, I think, as far back as 2005, dealing with the Iraq War. They have been opposed to policies that would have benefited the veterans coming home from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So they have no interest really in post-traumatic stress disorder, except for when it's convenient, because her son, instead of taking personal responsibility for his actions, notwithstanding he could be suffering from PTSD, we're bleeding heart liberals. We'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But instead of doing what they would do with everyone else, all of a sudden PTSD is an actual thing that they will even acknowledge, but only for a few seconds before they throw it away and say, blame Obama. This is what we're dealing with. This is the level of idiocy that we're dealing with. This is the level of absurdity, that the blatant disregard for hypocrisy. We're dealing with, and what's bothering me is I see traits of this on the left and creeping into the left even more. That really bothers me. I see people making dismissing facts in exchange for convenience. I see that creeping up in the left. And I want to yell at the top of my lungs, you know, I don't care who it is, right? Whether it's somebody supporting Bernie Sanders or somebody supporting Hillary Clinton, you know, let's be factual. Let's be, sound like I'm blowing my mic out. Let's be true to the facts of the story and to the data. But I see the insanity on the left, on the right, and I'm like, we have to fight against this tooth and nail. We have to fight against this no matter what we do. We got to make sure that this type of madness never gets in power. We need to help the Republicans. We need to help the Republicans purge themselves of the insanity that they expose themselves to. Yes, it is the Republicans' fault that people like Sarah Palin and Donald Trump can get and obtain and power. But for the sake of our democracy, we need to help them get back to their true conservatism so that we can actually have informed debates between two parties, right? We can't have an informed debate between one party. We need to have an informed debate between two parties, but we're actually dealing with a party that is the Democratic Party, and then we have another party that is completely insane. And again, I can't, just to throw this in here for free, I see some of that insanity creeping over into our willingness to dismiss the truth, dismiss data, ignore the facts in exchange for support for our candidate. I see it with Bernie Sanders supporters, and I see it with Hillary Clinton supporters. It is across the board. And I would advise us, let's not become the monster. Let's not allow ourselves to become the monster that we've been fighting against for so long. Maybe this should scare you guys straight. Don't become the Sarah Palins of the Democratic Party. Whatever the facts say, whatever the data says, whatever the story really is, we don't have to exaggerate it. We don't have to manipulate it. We don't have to use propaganda. We have the truth on our side. We can mobilize, we can weaponize the truth. We can weaponize knowledge and fight back against it. That's the point of the Progressive Army. And you too, going into my plug now, you too can become a part of the Progressive Army. Go to theprogressivearmy.com, register for our notifications. Consider becoming a Patreon, www.patreon.com/the BPD show. Thank you to my recent Patreons. I'll give you a shout out on Twitter. Thank you so much. Pledge $1 a day. If you can't pledge anything, then you can share these videos. One, you can subscribe. Make sure you subscribe on Spreaker and on YouTube. But then for every dollar that you cannot afford to give me, I want you to share that every single day. If you wanted to give me $5 a month, then share my video 5 times a day. And then you might get tired and say, okay, I'll pledge that $5 a month. Folks, I'm at the end. I'm out of energy.